Welcome back, everyone. We are at the Digital Workplace. We are doing some digital workplace reviews of platforms that we've found interesting that we feel like could be a central digital workplace for headquarters for your company. Here with Vijay Anand and Vonda Page. How are you both doing today?
I am doing great. Happy to be here. Excited to talk about another application.
Yep, look forward to it.
Yeah, so we are doing Clickup today. Clickup is very spends a lot of money on marketing, so we were all aware of what they do, and so we were very interested to see, okay, do they actually come back and deliver on what they're about? So Clickup is a great looking product. It's a product that really tries to sit in there. It says, one app to replace them all. So similar promises to what we've seen from some other companies and what other people are trying to say. So the big question is, how well does it get over? Before we actually look at the product, just a quick maybe overview. Vonda, your thoughts maybe going into ClickUp before you started.
So I was excited to go into it because I have heard positive things about it and I knew people who were using it. So that's always, a good indicator, right? When you've heard something, especially about, one of these smaller tools, right? And we've been talking about how do you think about onboarding, smaller teams, like maybe a team, of 50 to 100 people or 50 people or less. And
Yep.
so my initial reaction was wow, right? Just from the initial interface, right? And the initial experience, the introduction to it. So I was super excited. And the other thing was, looking at ClickUp at this stage really gives you an opportunity to think about it in conjunction with other applications, right? So to your point, Neil, they all make similar promises, right? And they all say, hey, right, this will replace everything and it's going to be the one-stop shop. So so I got a really good first impression and excited to jump into it a little bit more.
Yeah. Vijay, what about you going into it? What were your thoughts?
So, yeah, I think everybody is trying to consolidate the whole number of apps that the enterprise uses. What I actually kind of gave me a hint about what to expect was that when you look at the wording on the website, it talks more about work. So it's positioned more as a work hub rather than trying to be, a communication platform or a collaboration platform or even a digital headquarters, we see most of the digital workplace tools as. The fact that they're very clear on their mission as to here's where all of your work basically resides and you work with your team members. I think that was very interesting. It's a very, very souped up version of any of the project management tools that are out there. So if you take the spectrum of Slack, which is completely unstructured and chaotic, and you can take the conversation anywhere that you want, this is a lot more organized and structured, and basically makes things flow. So that's in my mind, at least that's how I saw ClickUp as. The name is slightly odd. I initially thought this is like, where do they get the name from? But yeah, in terms of the expectations, I think the product has some really, really high standards in terms of what it has delivered.
I think all the names are going to be odd from here on out, Vijay, so there's no other option. Okay, let's jump in. I like how you guys have framed this and what we're looking at. So here's my opening board that you see here. I think, Vijay, you said it well, that it is, all the platforms are going to look at have some like central module that's there. Well, I guess Catalog tried to take that away and use a dashboard type thing. But in general, they're all going to come with a position of strength. And definitely ClickUp's position of strength is project management. It is a pretty big powerhouse when it comes to those types of functions and features. But one of the big challenges that any company that's trying to do a digital workplace product out there is like this opening screen, how things are organized and how they're all here. So what are some of the thoughts you guys have as you look through what you see on this screen?
Well, for me, the thing I did like about it was I kind of thought it gives me a clean slate, right? And so I don't know how many people really have an opportunity to start work fresh, right? Other than your first day, right? At a new company, right? And so my kind of thought was, okay, if this was my first day, this looks amazing. It's clean, and I can think about how do I want to organize myself. Do I organize myself around a to-do list, right? So like a few minutes before we got on camera, we talked a little bit about first impressions. And I had mentioned that my team, they really like it because they like how you can organize the tasks for yourself. So when you think about each person's individual and unique work style, right? Or how they like to work, to me, this gives, a vast amount of a vast amount of user experience options, right?
Yeah.
So depending on what you like, what works for you, you could do some different things with it. And so to me, it starts off clean and it gives you options. So regardless of your work style, you can say, okay, I can figure out a way to make it work. So that was the first initial thought, and what I think is good about the setup. The name ClickUp, by the way, when I first heard about this app a while ago, I thought it was an app for you to like upload pictures and do cool stuff with it because of the name of it. That's what I thought it was. So to Vijay's point, right? I didn't know what this was in the beginning.
Yeah. Very true. Vijay, opening board thoughts here?
So I kind of played around this with a little bit by basically putting a bunch of things. I think the way, if you slightly think about it from the, the way that they've structured spaces and how you can create new project boards and stuff like that, this kind of might work, might not work, because if you start the day with maybe 10 different projects that are running, and all of your to-do lists basically show up here, I think it would be very confusing as to where it's from. Because when you basically start mapping it, it doesn't really tell you, for example, let's say you're organizing a venue event, and basically setting up the venue is one of the tasks to do. It basically says set up venue, right? It doesn't say that it's come from this project, which is to basically run that event. And I think that could be a little bit overwhelming. Like, to me, sometimes it's easier to basically start off with a smaller work so that you can basically get your small victories and basically start building on that. I like things a little bit more cataloged so that I know that if I'm going to start this, here are these 5 things that I need to finish. But if I start my day saying that there are 30 things to do, I don't know whether it's going to overwhelm me.
Yeah.
So I was not really sure whether this was the best way to go about it. But yeah, I like some other things that they've done in the other spaces.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. I do also like in some of the other tools where the homepage was a little bit more like, hey, here are just like the big tiles that you need. You can customize those to send you to one of these spaces or send you to some other thing that's there. This is not bad. I mean, I think most people are going to think in these terms. These are all the tasks that you have, the reminders that you have that need to come up. But it's there. Let's. I think the bulk of and the meat of what we have here comes in the spaces. Spaces is where you're going to see most of the tasks that come through, and how you're going to organize your project boards and things like that. So here's the big space we have for our talk that we're talking about today. They have a different views. You can do a list view, switch over to a Kanban board view. Interesting, a chat view is here if you just want to see all the comments that have been made, which is actually kind of nice to see.
Yeah.
Just to pull out all those comments in one place, I thought was nice. You can also add lots of other views, Gantt views, timelines, activities, all sorts of very interesting things. Like I said, there's really not, it's going to be hard to find a feature they missed when it comes to the project management side of things. So yeah, this was a very nice way to assign things. I think one thing that's missing from a lot of other products is something about this kind of priority, being able to do that. I love this feature, to be able to bring those things in when you open up a task or open up something that's there. Lots of things to be able to do and to be able to talk through. This is kind of some of their demo content that they have up here. You can track things on how much time you've done. Obviously, attaching comments, adding subtasks as well is pretty easy to do. So I don't know. This was pretty much a powerhouse and won on almost every metric I can think of. What are your thoughts on these boards and things?
So I thought, to your point, right? There is a really good level of robustness, right, in this, right? So you can do a lot. And I love, like I said earlier, how you can do it in the context of how you like to work. But the other thing to think about is always, as we talked about in other reviews, right? Most companies, most people, they already have something that they're using, right?
Yep.
And so you always have to just take into consideration, what are the key components or the features here that you are really looking for, right? And even when you think about, like, let's say the three of us were specifically looking for what we're going to use permanently, right? We would start off with a list of requirements, right, that are based on kind of how we think and how we like to work. What I love about this is that people can do that with any basic set of requirements that they have, regardless of the way in which they work, how the team is structured. So that's my thoughts on that piece of it. But once again, like I said, always considering, what do you have now and how do you think it's going to enhance that current way you work?
Well, Vonda, from your point, your team's used many other tools. You've seen different things. What do you think? I mean, coming from two places. One, someone coming from a tool like a Trello, that's kind of just a standard basic project management, and then someone coming from maybe just spreadsheets, like trying to handle it from that. Do you feel like ClickUp gives both those people enough, or maybe too many features to jump into it?
So it's interesting, right? So my one assistant, she has been using it, I think she said, for about a year and a half or so. And she likes it because she says she feels like it's really good for prompts. It's really good to remembering small tasks because of the way it reminds you. And also, to your point, around how you can prioritize, right, those key tasks, and to, be able to stay on track, right? Some of the other people who have used it, were like, well, I think it's similar to Trello because of the project management piece, but we didn't really talk about, some of the workflow integration, right, part of it, right, in terms of how you would do it with your work. Because when you're reviewing an application or reviewing a tool, right, as opposed to implementing it, there's sort of a different, context and a way you think about it. But because, one of my team members have already used it, it was kind of a little easier for us to think through it. But I still think that it depends on your starting point. So if you have good flows, if you have good communication, if you already have good collaboration with those teams, or people that you're working with, I think, you would really need to think through which are the pieces, right, that we know are going to lend to improving the way we currently work together.
Yep. I can definitely see, like, I would love this if I was coming onto somebody's team who was already highly organized, already had things in order and doing stuff. Like, that would just be a dream
A
if somebody
dream.
else had said that. But yeah, letting everyone start from scratch and do their own thing. Some teams are going to find their way. Some are going to struggle. But that kind of depends on the leader. What are your thoughts, Vijay?
Yeah, the thing that I'm realizing more and more as I talk to people who are setting up digital workplaces in the organization is that this whole measuring twice, cutting once concept of thinking before you start a project is a very rare quality. It's helpful when you can actually plan upfront and basically put down all the lists of tasks and plan it out. But the number of people who basically do that, especially in a startup environment, is very, very low. It's not the best thing. I think it is a pretty bad way of working. But unfortunately, that's also the reality. So when people haven't thought through their projects, or there is a little bit, vagueness in terms of how they're going to basically get a lot of these things done. I'm also trying to figure out, like, how do people work with this thing. I love project management tools because it kind of gives you a little bit of it kind of gets everybody on the same page as to what is expected of them. But it isn't necessarily not everybody thinks in a very structured manner. So I'm trying to basically figure out, like, from a creative process perspective, right? If you're a services organization, this makes a lot of sense because you create a lot of templates, you're creating projects. Maybe you're an event management company, maybe you're a company that basically creates content, and you have the set workflow that is going over and over again. But if you're a creative organization, if you're a startup which is basically trying to do things that has never been done before, I'm trying to figure out whether a project module being the core of the whole workspace actually makes a lot of sense.
And I think that's a good point, right? Because I've been thinking about that, and that's what I've been doing, right? So I have a startup, and I'm in year 2, right? And I've just gotten fully, I don't want to say fully organized, because do you ever get fully organized? I don't know. But I've gotten like really good now. Like they have my team, we have my content, my library, right? We have my contacts. Like we're getting good. We got project, like it's getting good. And so one of the conversations we had yesterday was, okay, we're working really good on Slack together. Like we're doing amazing on Slack with Google Workspace and making it happen, right? But I try a new tool, right? Somebody says, "Oh, but I use this for this." And so now I think probably within the next month or so, we're going to start to have the conversation around, okay, what works best? What are our primary needs, right? And so me, right, as the CEO, one of my primary needs is, as I'm ideating on all of these things which have never been done before, right? And I'm giving them my ideas and they're helping me to flesh them out. How are we doing it? Right? We're doing some things through Google Drive. So I'll create a document, it's in Drive, and then I'll send a note, share it, and say, hey, ... right? Or I'll share something in Slack, right? So I think that, to your point, if you're onboarded onto a company that's already using it and highly organized, if you're trying to start from scratch or whatever, you have got to have the conversation about how do we work and what do we think is going to work best for all of us. Because for me, right, as I'm onboarding my team members, like one person at a time, because again, it's a startup, and I'm saying, okay, I know I'm doing these things and they might not be the best way to do them. They might not be organized, but I'm doing them in startup mode. What do you think? So that's, it's cool and interesting at the same time.
Yeah, I love that there's some flexibility around that. Like you said, Vijay, for me, I'm like I prefer to be very organized and arranged and like make sure everything's clear. I could see like if I only had 2 or 3 people on a team, something like this may feel like overkill for somebody who's not like that. Hey, there's only 2 of us. Why are you assigning something to me? We can just figure out what needs to be done. But I feel like once you cross even that 3 or 4 people on a team, like the benefits definitely are extreme when it comes to what something like this can give you. And I do like that. I feel like if I was working in a larger company and I said, hey, I was brought into a new project to work with somebody else, like the way they would have set their boards up and the way they would have set everything up would look very different, but I would still be able to figure it out. So I think there's a little bit of that customization that could be there here, that you can, like, I would appreciate that, to say like, okay, this wasn't just built for me, but I can find my niche in here.
Yeah. So when I was playing around this the spaces thing, and I saw the way that they basically have the Gantt charts and all those things, I realized that for a company that actually has a linear progression of way of basically doing things, right? And this also applies to like how Vonda was saying, you might be a startup, but maybe 80% of the things that you're doing is already well structured. There is 20% unstructured stuff that you're trying to figure out. Why complicate everything? Like the things that are structured, put a process in place. I think that's the right way to do it. But then there is also a friction about you're bringing in teams that are basically, used to the idea of doing whatever needs to be done at that time and day. Because in a startup, it's usually that there is no if then clause. It's always like multiple ifs, and most of them most probably won't work out. Yeah. So how do you work all those things out? Like there are some small things that I wish it was there. Like, for example, the goal and the pulse thing that they actually have in this is
Okay,
beautiful.
Mhm.
I really like it. Pulse, I think, maybe the product that we reviewed earlier actually has a slightly more advanced version of Pulse than what is going on here. But goals is good. But my thing was that when you're creating projects and spaces, I would have expected that the tool basically asks, okay, you're creating this project. How does this relate to the goal that you set for yourself?
Yeah.
And there was no correlation between the two. You basically set a goal. There's a whole bunch of activities that you basically set up for yourself. And then you're running a whole bunch of projects and activities and tasks, but they're not connected in any way at all.
Yeah, I thought about that, Vijay, like that, like a hierarchy, right? Because I was thinking, because when we were looking at it last night, so there's there's 5 of us, right? So me plus 4. So when we were doing it, right, and we were like, okay, because my brain, I have Trello brain. My brain works like the way Trello is set up, but I operate the way you use Slack, right? So I operate like all over, but my brain works like Trello, right? So my brain looks at a bucket of a goal, right? And it says, here's the goal. What's all the things under it? Here's the stuff I have to do. Here's the logistics. It's like, and I say strategy, logistics, and then details, right? So my brain works like that. So for me, I was like, and I was saying, well, how do we make buckets? Because even if you see, I tried to create a new space, and then we tried to do a bucket, and then that didn't work. And then we went back, right? So I tried to do something for my speaking thing coming up, and it didn't work. Then we went back, and then we tried to do it under track. So we tried to do some different things, but I couldn't take my Trello brain, right? And match it to it that way. So we just created tasks and then talked about who would do that task related to how it fits under the goal. But then what I had to do, we pulled up my Google Doc of that strategy around that specific thing. So it was like still using, right, another tool, right, another app, another platform. So then to your original point, no tool does everything, no matter what they say.
No matter. In the end, they're all
In
lying.
the end.
So there's twice, Vonda, you brought up the concept of Google Docs and needing to go out of that. This part of Clickup blew my mind a little bit, is the fact that, I don't know if you go down here or something like that, like you can make a new doc. Okay. And I'm thinking to myself, why in the world did they build that functionality? And it's actually pretty nice. I mean, it's what you would expect from a Google document even. You get in, you can type whatever you want. You can actually be working on it at the same time. I believe you can see each other working. You can share it. You can format it. It's going to look nice. You can use it as like a Notion document or something like that as well.
Yep.
That could be there. But I kept thinking, like, why did they build this? Because you just, if you need this thing, you go to Google Docs, you go to something else. And then it suddenly hit me that they've changed the reason why you have a document. They've kind of challenged that assumption in the sense of, like, we don't just go and create a document separate. Like, a document should be related to a project, or a document should have something connected in with something else that's there. So if I go in, like with SEO management, with the site assets, like all of these are going to have documents that are associated with them because these are articles. But even if you're talking about a strategy document, like that should be connected to one of your main folders that's there. The document becomes a feature of the project, and not, I shouldn't have to go out into Drive and find that and then attach it in here. Like, it should just be part of it. It's a very unstructured element of whatever you're doing, so because you can format it any way you want, but it's basically just another element of this. It's just a document that's there. And the fact that they built that, they brought it in, and they want you to use it like that. They don't want you necessarily just to come down here and start a new document. They want you to open up one of these and say, okay, now add a document to it, because this is where it's going to live, and it's a little bit more standard. Like that was really challenging to my assumption. I appreciate that.
And I think, to your point about a new team coming on, that's what would make it work. But when you have work already in progress, right? And you're saying, how could we use this? How could we adopt it, right? So to your point about certain assumptions, right, that you're bringing to the table because you're already working a certain way. But if you were to say, okay, so like I only have 4 people right now, which is super simple. It's not bad, right? It's easy. We could say, okay, we're going to use this and this is how we're going to do it because it's simple, it's a small amount. But if it's next year and I have 12 people or 18 people, there's no way by then I'm going to be able to onboard people onto this because everybody, I'll be probably still working in Slack brain, right? Slack mode on Trello brain. but I think it has so many, great things, but it's the question of where are you, right, in your journey as a company, in your transition or state of a digital workplace. Where are you individually? What do you think, Vijay?
I don't think you should look at this as a digital workplace at all. I think if you look at it as a work hub, it works. I think if you try to do this as a digital workplace, I think there are a lot of features that are missing. As a work hub, I think it's 99% probably there. There's probably a little bit of things that are quite not connected. But if you're going to evaluate this as a digital workplace, there's a whole bunch of things that are lacking. Things around like, how are you going to build culture? Where is the HR team and basically culture team basically going to get in? You have a whole host of things that are not looked at all. But yeah, I mean, if you have a functional, I think as you rightly pointed out, if you have a functional working team, this is a great tool that will actually help work get done. If the team is dysfunctional, I don't think this tool is going to help you at all. I think you're going to have other issues.
Well, I think that's true anyway. For any provider we're going to look at, you don't think you wouldn't see like someone just making a new space here for the HR team or for something like that, and then being able to customize this for their own benefit?
I don't think the kind of things that HR would want to do is basically automated, right? Like they would want to start communications. I think there is internal comms as to like, what's going on with the team members. Internal, basically, like, what are the things that the organization is basically achieving that they want to let the employees know so that they feel proud and, build a shared identity and shared responsibility. I don't think people are going to look at it from a project mode for those kind of things, I feel. Like some of the tools that you're actually seeing where people are basically able to take anonymous feedback from, from your 360 degree of peers, right? Both people who are working under you, people who are working alongside you, and people who are above you. I mean, you'll require all of those things to be built in, which is not going to happen here.
Yeah, I can definitely see like the casual conversation nature of Slack. And I would assume that if somebody's using ClickUp, I feel like they're probably also using Slack or Teams or something like that to have those more unstructured conversations on the back end. They say that they replace Slack and they replace chat and they have all that there. But like you said, all the conversations have to be about a topic. And so it's very difficult to separate those types of things. So that would be a whole, I would say.
Yeah, and you also have limitations, right? Like for example, my previous example of like how I was talking about, like let's say that you're an e-commerce company and there is an order that comes in, right? Now there is no workflow tool at all in this product. There is an automation tool which is kind of doing the version of Zapier, and I think they're comparing themselves to like pricing wise. They're basically saying, Zapier costs this much, we are cheaper than that. So they're more like trying to basically be a API, integration tool in the middle. But let's say that, there's an order coming in through your Shopify account. Are you going to pass it on so that like, you're the team, which is basically in charge of fulfillment, can take a look at it, go through inventory, say whether it's there or not, and basically like, put together the package and basically sending it to the shipping department. I don't think any of those features are there at all. You could have a customer who basically raises a complaint and there is probably a case management that is like, a case is triggered. There is no way to basically for that entire process to come into this thing at all. Yeah, sure. There is a couple of options in terms of like, if a project changes status, they basically send out emails and things like that. But there is no other way around where there is an interrupt that basically starts create a workflow internally. Those kind of things don't happen at all.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with all of that. And one of the things, right, back to the conversation around, being a new startup, right? So one of the things that I've been working on with my team is what are the right the right workflows, right, for us, so that things, even though you have a task, right, that's an individual thing, but that task is related, once again, back to the conversation about goals, right? That task is related to other stuff. So how do you think about it in conjunction, right, of that, if that workflow piece is missing? So like one of the things that I'm working on, so right, when I put the October 23rd speaking in there, there's all of these different pieces to the overall like goal of it, right? So part of it was, reviewing with my coaches, practicing the final version, doing the social media, right? But we were trying to think, okay, so once I do this, how do you know this thing is done? And then how will that trigger, right, the person who's going to be doing the social media? So how do you trigger and link, right? So we were trying to go into the subtask piece and figure out if you could link, that after this happens, then to do it. And it was a struggle to figure out. So once again, if it's not going to almost instantly or immediately you see the value of the work. So if you have to do too much clicking and too much figuring out, you're not going to do it, right? And after a few minutes, depending on the priority level of that item, the urgency of it, the complexity of it, you're not going to spend 20 minutes trying to figure out how to build a workflow. If you can't do a couple of clicks around and figure out how to add a subtask, how to link it, but then we were like, oh, maybe we have to go back into the Gantt version and try to link it so it was a lot of thinking that was going to be necessary to figure out the workflow part. And for me right now, like that's still, a piece that it's better to do right before you get a big giant team of a whole lot of people.
It's also true that this is going to work great, decently well for you for this October 23rd speaking thing. But what happens when you're doing this every week? When you're going out and you're doing, 5 to 10 per month of these, like you don't want to follow the same checklist all the time. You want a little something more streamlined, something more workflow driven, to where it's a much more mature way to handle it, and that's going to be really difficult to do here.
Yep.
Good. A couple other things I wanted to highlight.
A simple thing as thinking, when I was going through this tool, I was basically trying to think about like all the things that you would do as a work team. And let's say that I want to take a day off. Like, what do I do with this platform? I'm still going to have to fire off an email to somebody, or I'm going to have to send a chat message, except that all the chats are now under project. So where do I have this conversation that I want to take a day off? Right? So yeah, I think those conversations are going to happen offline because the workflows are really not part of this thing.
And I think it all comes back to, project management is the central hub here, and everything's been linked to it. And even like you said, within goals, like goals was something they added in to support project management. It wasn't necessarily like the key feature where everything was built off of or anything like that. They do have a calendar view, which I find nice to be able to have that to see things as they come through. Again, when it comes to project management tools, I feel like this is fantastic. There's a lot of things there. It's just a matter of, do you want that to be the central work that you do, is these like semi-structured work that's out there, or do you need something more structured or less structured, or can you find something to do it all? Not likely, but who knows? Let's see, what else? Anything else you guys want to explore a little bit more?
You know what I would like to do? Go ahead, Vijay.
No, I was basically saying that this calendar and agenda was a little confusing to me, because even though it says calendar, I can't add an event to it. So let's say that, I want to have a conversation with Neil sometime tomorrow. There is no way that I can basically say have a call with Neil tomorrow and add a Gmeet link to it, even though there is an integration with Google Meet and all those things in the backend. So I still have to have a Google Calendar window or a Calendly to basically manage my calendar. And this is only like, deadlines of things that are happening, right? Okay, these are tasks that need to get done today. Reminders of things that I need to do, like, maybe I need to, email something, or I need to send a notification to somebody, or I need to renew a subscription, whatever it is, right? So I didn't understand the difference between what calendar and agenda was when they could have merged it together and basically, removed some complexity there. That mention bit also doesn't work. I have set it on read like 20 different times, and it basically just goes back to like 100 message, and it bothers me. Yeah, it has some bugs.
Yep.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Vonda?
The one thing I was thinking is maybe it would be helpful if we help people understand a little bit more between like, how do we view what a digital workplace is versus how do we see a work hub or like dashboard or like centralized place? Because as we're talking about it, that's why I love this conversation. I hope we do it forever, because it helps you think through it, right? And we're thinking through it from different lenses, thinking through it from just a plain old user experience lens, thinking through it from, a CEO startup lens, thinking from it, from a CRM lens, and all these different lenses. But maybe, if we say a little bit more about how do we define or think about, a digital workplace, digital work space type of, tools, application, product, versus what we have come to understand is this product is really a project management tool, right? It really is a Trello type of, right? It is a way to think about project management and a way to organize work. So maybe, I'd love to hear, Neil, especially since, I like to call you the founder, right? Of this, the way you conceptualize and talk about the digital workplace, right? So talk about that a little bit, and let's help people understand, digital workplace versus a work hub.
So I'll throw out my ideas out there, and with the caveat that I'm going to change them all by the time somebody actually watches this video.
Okay, cool.
but in general, no, seriously, the way I've defined a digital workplace when it comes to an actual product is really that idea of if you used to be in the office, like the office used to function a lot of different things. The office was goal management because everyone could it was just in the air. You knew what you were all working on. The office was project management because you could just spin your desk around or your chair around and ask somebody what the status was with something. The office was where your culture happened. The office was where all your collaboration of different sorts. If you're going to say you're going to move that headquarters away from there, then you need to have something that all that can rest on and that can support the work that you're actually doing. So for me, work management is a central part of a digital workplace. But if you throw something like this in front of somebody, like Vijay said, there's still going to be a lot of holes. There's a lot of unstructured collaboration that needs to happen. There's a lot of very structured collaboration that needs to happen when it comes to workflows and automations that need to be there. So to really say, yeah, this tool is a digital workplace, for me, it's looking at the whole thing, and it's able to broadly say both collaboration in terms of just being able to talk to each other in a very unstructured way, in a very structured way. It kind of brings all that together into one bit. So I would say ClickUp has done, just as an example here, they've hit that middle place solidly. Like they've got that down of project management. But this side on the right of more of, how do we just kind of build in this softer culture of just kind of checking in with somebody and just saying, hey, what's going on? And then on the other side, with that is very structured and very much like workflow driven. That's also a little bit missing. I don't know. That's my thought. Well, let's go to Vijay. What do you think?
I would agree with you. I think even if you basically say that ClickUp is focusing on work management, there is still some bits that I would say is usually expected. Like, for example, if I want to basically have, and this happens all the time, right? Like in a given week, you're probably in 10, 15 meetings. what is the digital version of a meeting and how does it happen and what is the right way of going about it. This tool doesn't really have any way of basically supporting that. Sure, you can basically have Gmeet and basically schedule a call, but what happens beyond that? Like, we know the issues with everybody gets on a call, everybody discusses issue, but unless a meeting can translate automatically into like, here are the four things that you agreed on during this meeting, where is the, if it, unless it shows up on a task list immediately, then that's complete waste of like, that's still very inefficient in the way that we're going about it. How do you basically arrive at consensus? Maybe there is a group of designers who are basically saying that here's a new UX that I'm basically putting out, and people are debating what works, what doesn't work. Today the system does not actually have a way of basically deriving it. I was mentioning, there is a chat function, but there is not even a poll function, right? So I can basically say, should I go with blue or blue? Should I go with red? Which one goes well? But it's still, textual driven rather than basically trying to arrive at consensus. So I think even on the work management front or a work hub front, there are still a little bit of gaps in terms of like achieving it. I think today it's a, Trello wrapped up in a, in a outer canvas, which basically does a little bit of contextual collaboration is what I would say. They're adding documents to it, they're adding conversations and chat to it, but I think there is still some missing gaps in terms of being a total work hub.
Vonda, from your seat, I mean, you're building this from the ground up. What do you feel like a digital workplace means to you?
So, I agree with you as well, because I look at it as we are all, no matter what kind of job you have, right? Whether you work in technology or, whether you work in landscaping, every job is digital, right? In some way. And when we think about knowledge workers, right, and technologists, and we think about your point of going and transitioning from being in the office, turning around and saying, hey, what time is that thing? Okay, 4:00. Oh, okay, that's almost done. Oh, hey, to go from that to now we only have digital means, right? We do have to build everything from the ground up, right? And I think that the issue, and I wrote this note down as you were talking, is I think part of it, the biggest part, or one of the biggest part, is the leadership style. And how do you think about leading your team anyway? So because I'm an organizational change manager, a technology adoption, architect, like I've been doing that my entire career, I lead differently. So for me, right, it's all about understanding the right workflows, the right processes that's going to help the team work with me. Because like I said, I know my brain is Slack brain. Like I work like Slack, but I think in Trello form. That's not necessarily going to translate to all different kind of people in the way they work. So I'm building a culture, first of all, where everybody has input and a voice, because I'm asking my team, does this make sense? Does this work? Here's what I want to do. Here's how I'm thinking about it. But what does that translate in work for you? So if I'm giving one person an assignment like research, right? So I had some specific points I was looking for around what does the developer experience look like when they think about innovation, right? And what challenges they face. So if I'm given an assignment, it has all this other context that goes with it, but it begins with my team understanding me and my business and how I work, right? So my main thing is to provide change leadership, advice, instruction, and guidance for digital tools, for equity and inclusion, and for, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math innovation. So for me, I think about it like that. So I agree that digital workplace, it has to accommodate the people, the processes, the systems, the tools, and the experience. And so that has to be, I think, how you think about it. And then applications and tools like this and others that we're going to talk about is part of it. But it has to be that conjunction. And I think when we made the transition from office to this, a lot of leaders are still trying to lead with that same style, right? And they haven't converted how you lead teams in a digital workplace.
I am so glad we are recording this because you said a lot of great things there that I want to go back
think
and
about
listen
it
to.
day and night.
It's awesome. I'm reminded of that old Marshall McLuhan quote about the medium is the message. And that applies here directly. Like whatever tools have by default become your digital workplace, whether it's Clickup or anything else you're using, that is how you are communicating now. You're restricted to the bonds of how that is. Whether if you're using Slack, then that defines what your workplace looks like. And to your point, Vonda, that's the leader's call usually. Like I'm going to go find the one that fits me the best. If I had to describe like my personality in an app, maybe it'd be like Notion. Like I like to see things structured and be able to write a lot, but also be able to have some interconnectivity. But that's going to be me, and I'm going to bring that bias into there. And whenever I bring on somebody new, I'm saying like, this is who I am, and this app or this tool communicates what I expect out of work. But somebody else is going to have a totally different viewpoint on that too. Vijay, what's your soul app? The one that communicates your personality?
It's definitely a mind mapping app.
Yeah, that's true. You sent me those before.
Yeah, I send everybody a mind map, and people have no clue what I'm trying to convey.
I'm always like, okay, I'm gonna save this. Maybe I don't know what to do with this.
Exactly. Like, but to me, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, but to everybody else, they're like, so what does this actually mean? I'm going to write the 50-page document on this someday.
Cool. Vonda, great question. Thanks for leading us in there. And
Yeah.
I hope people can get a lot out of that. We'll definitely take these conversations forward as we're moving forward with these calls. This is great. Check Clickup out. I mean, it's a great tool, especially for project management. It's extremely reasonably priced for what it does. I think you can get the basic version for $5.
Very well thought out. Like one of the things that I want to add is also that I looked at their mobile app. So they have a separate app and what goes into the mobile app, they have definitely thought through, to make sure that not everything that you're not overloaded with information that you are seeing on the desktop version that gets translated into the mobile app. You're only looking at your tasks. You can add reminders, So I think that is very, very well thought. Like, whoever is behind this team, they are thinking through the future of work. But it's the state of the world that, we were all supposed to get there in 10 years. We're just expecting that things will happen miraculously, which is not. And I think that's fair. It's unfair to expect that to happen also.
Totally. And they don't seem to have an issue with adding more features. So I would expect it to change and to continue to build out. Yeah. Very cool. Well, that is our review of Clickup. Thanks a lot, Vijay and Vonda, for being here and for doing this. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time with the next product.
Absolutely. All right. Bye.